Hey, our first speaker of the afternoon session, this guy's, he spent 7 years at Amazon and working with a lot of P21 clients, assisting them in their commerce strategies. He's an e-commerce technologist. He's with DCKAP, and he focuses on a lot of online, raising your revenues online, things like that. Please welcome Praveen Venugopal.
So, first of all, thank you, Bill, for introducing me. But I'm Praveen Venugopal, just to pronounce it right. So, as he mentioned, I've been with Amazon for over 7 years, and I've been with DCKAP for around 3 years right now. So that's a short gist about myself. So let us move on to the topic, right? So I think we'll make it a little interactive in terms of what we're going to do. Okay. So what I would want you guys to do is show your hands if some of these points are relevant for your business. Okay. So basically, you know, technology is required, but you're not really sure where to start or what you'd really need to aim for. How many of you guys? Okay, maybe a few. Okay, that's good. And then, how many of you guys are doing most of your transaction via email or fax or even face-to-face communication? How many of you guys get to do that? Yeah, I think maybe 30–40% of the crowd. Okay. Yeah, so I think how many of you guys feel that you're not able to generate leads via an online platform because you don't have an online platform, you're not able to generate leads? How many of you guys feel that way? A couple of you guys, okay. So you have everything in place. Maybe you have the e-commerce, you have the ERP, maybe you have the CRM, you have everything in place, but somehow it is not integrated and you need to keep doing all of these manually. How many of you guys do in a similar fashion? Okay. Okay. So how many of you feel that, I think we have spoken a lot about product data during our morning session. So how many of you feel that your product data is underdeveloped or it is not properly managed at this point in time? Yeah, that's a sizable crowd. Okay. And this is the other thing, right, which Karthik was pointing out in terms of how many of you are struggling after going to e-commerce, right? So how many of you have already invested on e-commerce or any kind of digital commerce, right? And still you're not able to see the returns out of it, or you're struggling there. Okay. We just have JIS there. Okay. Sure. So I think I just wanted to get a fair sense of the crowd sitting here, right? So I think that's the intent of going here. So just to understand on if these are some of the challenges that you face. And in case if that's not the case, I think it is still good in terms of how we are doing things, and that's a good avenue, and we can see on how we could expand further as well. So I think that's the intent here. So I think, yeah, can some of you guys point out on what are the current challenges that you guys face on a day-to-day basis? Yeah?
Inventory management accuracy.
Accuracy? Inventory management, and okay. Oh, it looks like we have a seamless business running all around.
Communication.
Communication? Yeah, that's a key thing. Yeah. 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 Retention of staff? Users. Okay. What else?
Growing sales.
Growing sales, yeah. That's really important.
Increased competition.
Yeah, I think increased competition, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair sense of, I get a fair sense of what you guys are looking at, and it's also in line with some of the distributors that we have spoken over the last few years. So I think these are some things, right? So I think we spoke about Amazon a lot, so I'll get on to the next item on the disintermediation, right? So in today's world, so I think with respect to today's world, there are a lot of things where, a lot of areas where there are manufacturers who are directly reaching out. I think they are trying to cut out the middlemen in some ways. So I think that is also one thing which we have seen. And again, to be up on track, so I think they might not be able to go and delve into details like what a sales rep could do, right? So I think that is one area where we could kind of work on. And I think it is in line with what we discussed about increasing productivity. So I think Karthik mentioned about how maybe a 5% could help in a long way. So I think that's the next thing. And again, this is more on the talent, and Karthik also pointed out in terms of the stats on the retention of these workforce, and most of these are aging workforce. And some of the ones who are coming in, I think they are getting into different verticals. I think that is one thing which we need to be cognizant of. And how do we optimally utilize the resources and at the same point of time leverage e-commerce to make sure that we could fill that gap, right? I think that's the intent here. So yeah, I think right on. So inventory management, I think this is one of the most complex things on the distribution space, because I think right now there are multiple warehouses and there are various complex logics, because there could be some inventory in one warehouse and some inventory in other warehouse. How do you manage all of this? So I think it becomes really critical that we understand the business, and accordingly we could cater the technology towards that. Yeah, I think this is the most important. Even Sachin touched upon it briefly, right? In terms of how customers' evolving demands are increasing, right? So earlier it used to be more of e-commerce or commerce. So right now it is more in terms of user experience and all of that, right? Earlier that used to be more of a B2C thing. So in today's world, it is more of a B2B thing. So I think the low effort experience is one of the key things. I think we'll talk about it a little later as well, but then I just wanted to touch base on this. So these are some stats. I think you guys have seen a lot of stats since morning. Maybe I also have a few stats, so which is relevant more to the B2B space, right? So B2B is growing at a good pace, which is encouraging. So I think Sachin mentioned that 40% are on B2B and remaining are yet to get there, but then it is growing at a good pace. So I think that is one area we see, because I think on the B2C side, it is kind of getting stagnant, and on the B2B, everybody recognizes there's an opportunity there. So people start moving in that direction. So that is one thing I want to point out here. So I think we touched upon social media, on how important that is. So on what reviews your customers share. So I think those were all more of a B2C thing at some point in time, but these days it is getting more as a B2B. So I think we need to keep concentrating on those items. So I think with respect to the B2B business, so we expect that to double in 2020. So this was something which was picked up in 2018. So I think there has been some distance we have gone from there, but then this is going to double, because which means that most of the customers are moving from offline to online, right? So, and that gives them the advantage or the edge over the other distributors. I think that is one thing I wanted to bring in here. Okay, so we also touched upon the mobile and how it is important, and that's so yeah, I think this is a really key component, right? Of late, I think it is not just the stats, right? With respect to some of the customers reaching out to us, so this has been really critical on the scheduled deliveries. So people want convenience and need the inventory coming in delivered at whatever time they want. I think that is going to be really critical, because in today's world, I think shipping is one of the key components for somebody to choose or not to choose a solution, right? Because I think even with your products, you might be having a competitive pricing, but if you're losing out on shipping, it makes a huge difference for them to choose a different solution. So I think that's why scheduled deliveries is also a key part in the equation. Yeah, so with respect to sales reps, right? So I think the sales rep play a really important role. So I think with respect to e-commerce, it's going to complement the role of a salesperson and make sure that they are able to work even more efficiently, right? I think that has been the intent. And in today's world, once somebody realizes that this is what I'm going to buy and this is from where I'm going to buy, they really do not want to get on to a sales rep and keep communicating to them, right? So that's the intent here. So so here, basically, we need to make sure that we are giving the opportunity for them to self-service. So that way, that could be e-commerce, or it could be even punch-outs, which Brad is going to talk about. So I think it depends. So based on your businesses, right, you could cater specifically to them. Okay. So I think with respect to technology, I think there are a lot of things, but on a high level, these are things which I think you guys might be talking day in, day out, right? So I think the ERP is your top thing, so e-commerce comes after that for you. And it also makes sense, right? Because the ERP is generally the single source of truth for most of the distributors. And then the e-commerce is more of a user-facing engagement. And the CRMs is also a key part, right? So customer engagement could be multiple things. So I'm just talking more on the CRM perspective, which is really critical. So if we could, again, integrating all of these is going to be really critical, and that's where the omnichannel and all of that comes into place. And I think Karthik spoke about PIM in the morning. So I think that's also a key part in the overall equation. So just moving on from here. So I think Sachin covered a lot of B2B feature set and all of that. So I think how B2B customers are kind of aligned right now, and how BigCommerce is helping and all of that. So what we are going to cover right now is, so based on whatever experiences that we have had with the distributors over the last few years, I think we have collated some of the key things which is really critical for your business, right? So I've subclassified into 3 parts. One is some of the key B2B feature set which some of the customers come up with. And the second thing is more on the product management. So I think what product-related features they are looking at. And the other thing is more on what Karthik just started off more on a high level on the low effort experience, right? So I think I'm going to walk you through some of these feature set which will definitely help you understand. Yeah. So with respect to the B2B feature set, right, the customer approval workflow, I think that's a key part. So in some cases, there's going to be a sales rep, there's going to be a customer, you're going to tag a customer to the sales rep, and then the overall transaction happens. So having that workflow in place, and then even within the customer, as you guys might be knowing, so there is going to be a customer and there is going to be a contact. So I think in more from an ERP perspective, right, that's how you look at it. So it is more of a customer is more of a bunch of representatives, and a contact could be one particular contact. And then you also define specific roles for each of them. So you're going to say product management is going to be done by this particular person, versus the sales related transaction is going to be done by the other set. So that's the intent here. So, and automating all of this via e-commerce is a critical thing. So I cannot say on how important this is for the overall equation, as you guys might agree. On the pricing, I think there are a lot of things even within pricing, right? So there is going to be tier pricing, there is going to be customer-based pricing, there is going to be product-based pricing. There are various things to it, and thinking of it, that it is not just limited to this, right? There are going to be permutations and combinations of all of this happening in the overall equation. So how does maybe e-commerce or digital commerce help in the overall equation? So this is something which generally some of our customers come up with. And having a custom catalog is also really important, because you know that for some of your customers, you would like to give them a bigger catalog and access to a bigger catalog, while for some others, it could be much lesser. So those are the things which customers really seek for. Yeah, so I think the next is on sales rep inquiry and ordering. So from the sales rep perspective, right, so Adam spoke about this as well in terms of how they are able to help customers. So I think that's the intent here. So if the sales reps could place orders on behalf of customers, even without really relying on some of the ERP and all of that, and if they could do all of that by themselves, I think that is going to be more of an ideal world. And that's where I was talking about how do we effectively utilize the sales reps rather than just leveraging them as how we do right now. So this is also a key thing. So for most of the businesses, this applies in terms of the credit lines. So the credit line is more like, so you give them credit. So these are net terms, right? So you give them 30 net, 60 net, 90 net. So I think these are the net terms that you give. And then if you could automate all of that via e-commerce, right? So you let them know, you allocate a budget for a customer, maybe even from your ERP or on the e-commerce, you allocate a budget for them. And then they are able to spend only from that budget. And once they exceed the budget, then they're going to get, then there is a notification which goes saying that you might not be able to place anything over and above this. So I think these are some of the use cases, right? So this becomes really critical, that to more from a distributor perspective, because with respect to Amazon or any of these guys, it gets hard to get into that territory. So I think that is one advantage that we have, which we need to kind of leverage even on the e-com side of things. And the next thing is on request for quote. So with respect to request for quote, it is more like negotiated pricing terms, right, in some ways. So there are going to be a bunch of customers who come to you who are going to say that I want maybe hundreds or maybe thousands or even a million items, right, so based on the business. So, and then they ask you for a price. And again, all of this right now happens via offline mode, right? But then if somebody is already registered with you, so I understand with a new customer, right, at this point of time, he requires a little bit of salesperson hand-holding and all of that. But at least with some of your existing customers, I think if you want to keep doing this on a day in, day out, so I think as Sachin pointed out, the greatest advantage is doing things at their convenience, right? You have 24 hours in a day, and if you could do what you want to do at what point you want to do, I think that is an ideal world. So I think this becomes really critical in the whole scheme of things. And this is relevant for some businesses, not for all. So this is more like for some businesses, I think they ideally would like to do the samples, do the sample orders, right? So they send out the samples, and if the customers are really satisfied, then they start buying things in bulk from you. So I think if the e-commerce could have this capability, right, you get all of this automated. I think that's the whole intent, right? You are trying to eliminate some of the effort which is redundant at this point in time, which easily an e-commerce system could take care, rather than you really getting onto the manual side of things. So, yeah. So this is more on some of the most sought B2B features which come up with. And the next is on the low effort experience, which I was talking about. So I think ease of product access could be multiple things. So one thing is, because as you understand, so if people can identify products, I think it makes it a lot more easier for them to make the purchases. So if they are not able to identify, and there are also stats which says that I think the probability of them going out is a lot more when compared to, and they are not going to keep searching on your website to find what it is, right? So that is where it becomes really critical. And as Selvan was pointing out, so if you are giving more of these alphanumeric SKUs and all, I think it becomes really difficult for Google to search for it, and even for the customers to really search for it. So I think, so it becomes really critical on how they are able to access the data. So what we could do is, so I think if people are going multiple levels, even within your product page, even within your website, to identify a product, that's not a great user experience, right? So I think you would want to ideally bring down the number of clicks which is going in. So it could be accomplished by various ways. One of the things which really works is more on the mega menus or the bigger menus, where there could be multiple levels of scroll down, and then you could click on what product you want, rather than going through the entire stuff and then not even really sure if you're going in the right direction. And this is also related to the first one. So this is also going to help with the product access. So Sachin stressed upon this, but I would like to stress upon it even further, because I think it is really critical to have a really good search for your website. It depends. For each business, it could be different on what your needs are. It could be as simple as maybe suggestions based on whatever letters you're typing at, and then you get recommendations. Or it could be a little more complex, like in terms of you search for something and you get something little more relevant, right? So for example, if you're searching for a laptop and you're displaying a Mac, so it is not relevant in terms of what keywords you're putting in, but then it returns the right results. So I think these are something which we can leverage, and there are also a little more AI capabilities on search. So I think there are a lot of solutions which are available in the market. It is just a matter of choosing on what is a right fit for you and then moving from there. I think we spoke about this a little earlier, and so I'll move on to the next one. So yeah, the reorder is also a really key thing, right? So I think many people stressed within the room on how important reorder is. But then it seems to be a really easy feature to be implemented and all of that. But then even within reordering, there are nuances which we really need to understand, right? Because with respect to customers, some of the customers are not going to really reorder just as is, right? So if you're going to do it that way, yeah, that is well and good. But in some cases, there are going to be situations where you might have to edit your order before you reorder. So I think it's really critical. So, and some of them even have something called as order pads, where you have the frequently accessed items, and then you bring them to the order pad and then display it to the customers, and they could place an order from there. So making the experience easier is really important in this case. So yeah, so this is something which with some of the distributors are starting to get on, right? Because we understand the deliveries and how much it takes for the shipping and all of that, right? It makes it easier for the fulfillment if it is going to be from one centralized location as opposed to having it in multiple locations. So I think that's the intent here in terms of how you could leverage that. So a lot of the companies have already started doing an even here, right? So on how we could leverage this. So this is something for some businesses, they initially hesitate, but then if you have a good chain of the pickup locations and all of that, I think you could reduce on the shipping cost to a certain extent. So that is something which we could look at. And the tax exemption, this is also more of a manual job at this point in time, where somebody has to really talk to somebody and get all of the forms, verify it, and then approve them. So if you could just do it with a flip of a button from the back end or something, I think that's an ideal world you would like to be in. So I think that is what we are trying to bring in here. The next is on the product management. So with respect to product management, the first thing I wanted to focus on, at least with most of the distributors, this is something which they come up with of late. On each of the product pages, they want the specifications for the product. It could be PDFs or any file format, right? So in terms of for them to access them so that it is relevant for that particular product, and they could download that and they could access it, right? So that it makes it easier for them rather than they reaching out to the customer support. Again, it's going to make things manual. So I think this is one thing which we could concentrate on. And the next item is more on the variants. So variants is more like, so you have multiple variants even within the same product, right? So rather than having one product page for each and every granular product, right? There could be multiple products which share a common nomenclature or a common hierarchy. So for example, let's take a fastener, right? So there could be fasteners which are of the same family, and there's no point in having multiple product pages for the same product, right? So it makes more sense to group products based on their relevance. So that way, I think it is easier, and the product pages are lesser, and indirectly, it also helps with cross-sell of your products, right? So if you're trying to display a set of products within the same page, if somebody wants to buy a particular product, and in case if they're interested in something else, they could still order that as well. So it is an indirect way of cross-sell which we could do in the platform. And it could be something like a general use case, like multiple variants, like you have a shirt, and you have multiple colors and multiple sizes. So this might not be relevant for the group here, but then just a use case. Yeah, the custom part number is also an interesting concept. So custom part number is more like, so you build a product on your own, right? So there is already a product, and if you want to create multiple variants of the same product, so with just some minor modifications here and there, so you could do that. So I think that's the, and this is also an interesting thing which we have been getting off late, is on shop by diagram. So it is more like people really do not know on what they're going to shop. So you just present them with the diagram and what part is what. For example, if you're taking a car and there are going to be thousands of parts within the car, at least from a distributor standpoint, right? If you're planning to sell something and if they want to specifically ask for a particular part, right now they are not really sure on what it is, and they need to do some amount of research before they reach to that particular situation. But then if we could give them the low effort experience of making sure that they really need not go through that, I think that would really help the cause. I think this is something which you all might be knowing in some way or the other. So I think you sell some product, and at some point in time, you would want to cross-sell similar products, or in some cases, you would want to even upsell, right? So maybe if somebody is trying to buy a tire, and then you could also suggest a tube which is fitting to the tire. So I think those are the relevant things, and all of this could be mapped easily from in a bulk format, right, on the e-commerce platform. So I think this has been covered some time back. So in terms of multi-warehouse, so how do we manage that? So consider the situation, right? So there are three warehouses, and then there are multiple inventory levels for each of these warehouses. One thing is you could display all of that. So some businesses prefer doing that, some businesses do not prefer doing that. So again, based on your preferences, you could display on what's your inventory for each of these locations. And alternatively, you could also, in fact, show the inventory to them even without they really having to choose that, right? So by business logic, we could calculate on which inventory is best for them, and then we could suggest this is where I'm going to ship you from, and this is going to cost you so many dollars for the shipping. So that's the intent. So that is more on the e-commerce side of things. So I think we spoke about this on a high level in terms of how integration is really important, right? So there could be multiple pieces which is residing, and how do we integrate all of that? So why do you guys think integration is critical? Or do you guys, yeah?
Better quality data.
Better quality data? Yeah, that's right. What else?
Nothing matters if the accuracy is no good.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing matters. The accuracy is not great. Okay. What else? Anything else?
Any more questions? You guys awake? We'll take that as a no. Are you all right?
Yeah. No. I think I'm.
Oh, I thought you.
Yeah. Good on time. Yeah.
I'll back that.
Sure.
You didn't want to be safe. Not that you're not enjoying that.
Okay. So I think as we discussed, the omni-channel experience is one of the key things, and the two gentlemen were spot on. I think improving the efficiency, or in terms of improving the quality, is really important. And having a single source of truth, I can't say on how important that is in the whole equation of things. So you have multiple sources of information, and if it's not integrated, I think it's not going to be relevant, and there's not going to be a single source of truth. So that's the intention here. And and with respect to ROI, so it helps in maximizing your ROI because you're not trying to pull data from different sources, all of these manually, and trying to put that across in a spreadsheet or something, and trying to evaluate if it is right or wrong. So there's a lot of manual effort which is not required in this case. So this brings us to Chloris. So I think this is one thing which had some interest. So we thought it might be apt to kind of discuss a bit about this. So Chloris is basically our integration product. So with respect to Chloris, as you see over here, it integrates with multiple e-commerce solutions. It integrates with multiple ERPs, and it also integrates with CRM, PIM. So I think that's the whole intent of Chloris, right? So bringing all of the data together and making sure you're having a single source of truth, And that way, the customers, or that way, your business is even more efficiently running, right? So I think that has been the key intent of Chloris. So I also wanted to give you a short background of how we started Chloris. So with respect to DCKAP, we have done over 50 integrations in the past. And then I think there was a common issue or an opportunity which we really saw, right, is in terms of the data which was passed on was not reliable, or in other cases, it was, as you guys might see, it is more of a technology or a technical thing, and it required always some amount of development support every now and then. So I think that is an area where we saw an opportunity, and that is when we started off with Chloris. And with Chloris, so we initially started off on the industrial distribution space. So I think during the course of our journey over the last 2 to 3 years, so what has happened is, so we have been learning some of these challenges. So I think we have documented some of these over here, right? So I think we have learned all of this, and then as part of our learning from each of our customers, we have tried to incorporate that into our product and grow our product. So, so that is how Chloris started off, and right now I think we have over 10 distributors just on Chloris, and this is just on the P21 space, right? And there are a few more on the other ERPs as well. And this is basically a SaaS-based product, so which means that it resides on the cloud. And this is an AWS infrastructured product. And basically, it's a middleware, right, as we discussed, so it integrates multiple systems together. So that's what Chloris does on a high level. These are some of the integration touch points. So some of the common integration touch points which we have seen. So from most of the individual distributors. So with respect to customers, it could be more like you're trying to create a customer on your e-commerce, and you want that passed on to your ERP. That is something which Chloris helps you with. And the other use case could be that you have information of a particular customer on the ERP when a customer is getting created. So what we do is we go back to the ERP and see if that customer is already residing on the ERP. And if he's already residing, we bring back the information of that customer, and then relevantly, you also get the pricing and all of the tier pricing and all of the logic which you have already set on your ERP back onto the e-commerce. So basically, you're not going to do redundant work of setting that up on the ERP as well as on the e-commerce system, right? So that is something which really solves. And orders and order processing are more in terms of you. I think this is one of the key things on the overall, from the customer's service standpoint, right? So you have an e-commerce system, and you're trying to place an order, and then you manually need to move those to the ERP in some ways because you want to maintain everything there. So in that case, I think it becomes inefficient. So what we do over here is, so we go through the order management, where once you place an order, the order information gets passed on to the ERP, and once the order confirmation is received, that goes back to the e-commerce. The order processing could be more like, for example, you're setting that to completed on the ERP, so you do not again want to come back to the e-commerce and say it is completed. So I think we bring that instantaneously over here. And product update, so again, this is one thing which we discussed, right? There are going to be product information. So at least at this point in time, most of your product information might be on the ERP. Most in the sense, most of your SKUs could be on the ERP, but the information is limited on the ERP. Maybe you have the SKU number, you have the SKU name, and maybe 1 or 2 more attributes to it. But then initially we create that over here, and then we move from there. And then the inventory is more in terms of, as you guys know, we can bring in the real-time inventory from your ERP and then get that displayed over here. And dynamic pricing, yeah, we touched upon it. So bringing the pricing logic, whatever is on the ERP over here is the thing. So these are some of the key features of Chloris. So I think we discussed about some of these in terms of it being a seamless integration. And the next thing is the real time. So the real time is one of the key things, right? So somebody has purchased something on your ERP, maybe 2 minutes back or 5 minutes back, and then somebody on the e-commerce platform is coming and trying to place an order. he knows that the inventory has already been exhausted by the person from the ERP side. So that way, you need not even fulfill the order, right? So he gets the information, it is out of stock. So I think that is more of a real-time synchronization we are talking about here. So secure transaction, so Chorus is basically PCI compliant. And by that, what I mean is, so we do not store any of the data on the Chorus platform. So we just process data via Chorus. So I think we queue up data and send it across via APIs. So we do not really store data on the Chorus. So this is basically plug and play. So with BigCommerce, we already have a connector. So I think once you connect your system, I think you're good to go. So you connect your ERP and BigCommerce, you're good to go. So it's as simple as that. So this is something which we recently implemented, which is multi-threading. So multi-threading is more like, so think about it, right? There are maybe 1,000 product updates that you have done, and if you're trying to process that, so in a general use case, right? What happens is, I think we keep processing all of these 1,000 one after the other. So right now, what we are doing is we are trying to process all of that in parallel. So that way, you do not lose out on a lot of time just for the synchronization. So we also have some basic metrics in terms of the analytics and all of that. And we have logging capabilities. So sometimes if something has not worked properly, maybe the integration has not happened properly, then you get an instant notification saying that this has not happened properly because of X, Y, Z reasons. So that's the use case here. So this is really important because maybe I can give you a use case, right? So for example, you have a field which is kind of mandatory on ERP, but you say that that is kind of optional on the e-commerce platform, and then you try to process this information, it wouldn't hit on the ERP. But then you get instant logs which says that this has not happened because of XYZ reason. So I think that's why it's critical. So personalized notification, this is also a key thing. So this can be customized to based on our needs, what notification we want to receive, right? So it could be multiple things. So for example, I can give you an example, right? So you have an inventory, and you have inventory for each of your products. So for each product, if you say that you want a threshold of 10, but for a different SKU, you can say you want a threshold of 1,000. You could do all of that. And once the threshold, it crosses the threshold, it triggers your email. So I think we are trying to kind of even automate some amount of your ERP work, right? So rather than you trying to monitor all of that, so Chorus tries to help you out in this regard as well. So this is the key or the crux of Chorus, right? The advanced mapping. So this gives, so as we spoke about it, lower developer dependency. I think that has been one key thing why we started off with Chorus, right? So the advanced mapping is more in terms of you having the flexibility to say on what field needs to go to what, right? From the Chorus backend. For example, I can give you an example, right? So you have a first name and a last name on the e-commerce platform, but then you could just have the customer name on your ERP. So what you could do is you could just concatenate, just like doing some logic. If you just put in maybe that would be A1 and A2, it would just push it in the format what we want. So I think it can also process some amount of business logic even within the Chorus platform. Yeah, and all of this wouldn't take a lot of time. Once we set this for you, it is a one-click enable or disable. So you could disable it. So in case if you feel that at some point in time there has been a problem with the data on the ERP and you don't want that data coming onto the e-commerce, you could stop it then and there. You could just click a button and you're done. So that way the customers do not see relevant, because we have seen a lot of businesses facing this, right? So I think they lose out on business and there's a lot of dissatisfied customers just because of one small error which happened on the ERP. So at last we are coming here. So I think there has been a lot of talking that I've done. So now you guys can see a video of what Chorus can do. And just after the session, so in case if you have any other. Yeah, so just after the session, right, so in case if you feel that I think the video gives you a high-level understanding, but it is a more of a condensed video, right? But then if you have any more questions or if you would like to explore further, maybe you could reach out to us and we can help you out and let you know on, or give you a full-fledged demo as well, right? I think these are some of our, I think we are big on the community and we contribute a lot on the blogs and all of that. So I think Selvan mentioned about that as well. These are some of the relevant blogs that I found which might be helpful for you guys. And at any point in time, if you want anything related to industrial distribution, so you could just go on to dckap.com/blog and search for industrial distribution. So you would see a bunch of blogs coming in. And even on Chloris, there are blogs. Yeah, so I think that is one thing I just want to bring in here. So I think this is pretty much what I had from a presentation perspective. So did you guys have any questions for me?
Is that integration in Chloris is at one time, and then it's kind of set? Leave it, they can just kind of resync as they need, schedule or on the fly?
Yeah, so I think what Brad is asking for is, so is the integration is more of a one-time thing, or is it something which we need to keep configuring every now and then? So this is going to be a one-time setup. So, and once you set this up and you're all done, and you need not keep configuring it every now and then, I think the only area where we see people kind of looking onto it is maybe for the scheduling, right? So if they feel on peak times you want to do the sync even more frequently, maybe once in 15 minutes or once in 30 minutes. So at that point in time, they come in here, but otherwise pretty much, I think you're all set. Any other questions?
Got one in the back.
Thank you. Just a general question about backup. Is that done at each system level, or is it something that your product initiates?
Sure. I think that's a great question. So with respect to backup, right, so I think with respect to how we handle this is we queue data. So we have an add-on on the BigCommerce or the Magento or the Shopify platforms. And on the ERP side, so we have the APIs which is passing through. So I stressed upon the reliability of data. So I think that's the key part, right? So with respect to reliable data, what we do over here is we queue up data. So in case if you're, for instance, think your ERP is down for some reason. So we queue up this data. So even if it is down, still the data is queued up. And once it is up, it processes that data. So I think there is no data loss in the overall process. I think that is one of the key features within Chorus. So yeah.
Any more questions for Praveen? Oh, we got one back here.
Social media, which ones do you think are relevant for B2B?
Yeah, it depends. It depends, again, with respect to social media, right? It depends on what you have already invested on. So, for example, for some businesses, we understand, so if it is going to be some of the things like maybe pictures, or it could be more photography related stuff, then maybe Instagram and all of that becomes really critical. But otherwise, generally, Facebook, Twitter handles, and all of that are generally integrated onto the website. So does that answer your question? Or?
You start getting into all the integrations and you find out that your ERP system can't handle it. What do you do then? Not all ERP systems can handle integration.
Not really. So as long as you have APIs, I think we should be able to do that. So we are not specifically looking for services for Chorus, right? So each and every ERP have their own API services. So we could leverage the APIs and we could get that done. So at least with most of the customers we have dealt with, generally there is an API which is already available. If you're more on the P21 vertical, we have the API for you. So that's how we do it at this point in time. And in case if it is going to be more of bigger engagement in terms of if you're really aware in terms of what you're going to do, and if we could really get an understanding of the ERP that you're having, and if there are people in-house who could guide us in terms of what data needs to be processed and all of that, in that case, we should be able to build APIs on our own. But otherwise, we generally bank on the APIs which are already available on the ERP systems.
Adding custom fields isn't an issue in like the ERP system. Pick that up with the API into the
Sure.
platform.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So we will definitely be able to pull up all of the custom fields. That is something which we do even at this point in time. So for example, one use cases could be that you could set whether a product needs to be on the e-commerce or not. You could set a yes or a no on one of your custom fields, and we can bring that back, and based on the logic, we could just show the products which is relevant on the website. Because you might be having a lot more products on the ERP which you wouldn't want on the website, right? So you could do all of that via custom fields, and we'll be able to pull that.
We have Flora already running.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
our question is, you're the one that hit my question. My question is that if we want to open a second store,
What is that?
if we want to open a second store in e-commerce,
Okay.
what happens to Flora? We have to buy another license, or we can work with the Flora that we already have now and open the second store?
Yeah. If you're opening a second store, it is going to be a second license, but then it would be at a discounted cost. Yeah.
Question over here.
Hello. So you had a slide up there, and there was a couple words that stuck with me. It said single source of truth.
Yeah.
And then you had, in the video, data field mapping, right? Where you have, I think it was Magento mapping over to the ERP system.
Yeah.
So that mapping is only going to be as good as that foundation of the data within there. And I think data maintenance is something that we're all here to kind of hear more about. What kind of best practices can you outline about that single source of truth?
Okay. Sure. That's a good question. So with respect to the best practices, right? So I'm pretty sure not all of that could be maintained even within an ERP, right? So within an ERP, you could maybe have all of the basic information, what is required for you to kind of process the order and all of that. And then we could have a a PIM or even an e-commerce system, right? So it depends. So it depends on the needs of how you are. So for some of the customers, when we interact with them, we understand that there might not be a requirement for a PIM in the first place. You could just manage with the e-commerce system. So within the e-commerce system, you could manage all of the data. And for the product data, that becomes the single source of truth. So, and then for all of your pricing logic and all of that, your ERP becomes the single point of truth. So I think you could define on which needs to be the single point of truth for each of your transactions. And again, it could be a longer discussion specific to business, right? So for some of them, just the e-commerce, okay? But for some of them, I think you need a PIM to kind of have all of that collated.
Any more questions for Praveen? I'm not coming up there until you tell me I can. All right, Praveen Venugopal.
Sure. Thanks a lot.